Hello, everybody, and we're back at it again today here. Today, I'd like to talk about, I know this is a little bit off the topic because I normally talk about business items, but one of the things I'd like to talk to you about is how to save money in getting a college degree. I've actually been to school twice, once in undergraduate, once in graduate. And, unfortunately, a lot of these things you don't learn until after the fact, until after you get the degree and you have the debt and you have the problems and you can't get a house and you can't have kids and you can't do all this stuff. And like, oh crap, I could have done this, I could have done that, I could have whatever. So hopefully I can reach out to some people out there before they get the college degree or before they go off to college and they start the process, or even maybe a parent is watching this somewhere and they're like, oh, this guy's actually pretty reasonable. So I'm going to go over some of the items that may help you out in doing so. Number one, just go to community college. Go to community college as long as you can. It's like 60 to 70% cheaper than going to college itself. I know a lot of parents just want to be in a rush to get their kids out the door and just don't want them living in the house anymore and force them in the dorm. Look, I get it. Your kid's aching to get out. He or she may be asking you that he or she wants to leave. You may want them to leave because you're tired of cleaning up their messes. But, if you could just have them go to community college for a year or two and save $10,000 to $20,000 and avoid all the silliness of undergraduate, definitely recommend doing it. It also just has them kind of wait a little bit to kind of grow up, which might be a good thing for a lot of kids who are just turning 17 or 18 and just don't have the wits in them to do so. So definitely check out community college and, see what transfers to college and what doesn't. So that way what they're doing is beneficial and helps them towards a degree. Like I said, saves them a lot of money. Number two, competitively shop around for textbooks and other school items that they make you buy. School books, they may have things like, calculators, etc. Just things that they need. Shop around for the best deal. Unfortunately, in us going to grammar school, we have the idea that school and hence the government, they want what's best for us. And they want to give us the best values and the best things. Well, I got news for you. When you go off to college, they say it's a nonprofit, but they're there to make money off of you. Nobody's working for free, and they're going to try to do what they can to get the most amount of money. So, and your job is to keep the most amount of money. So, see if you can shop around, go to Amazon, secondhand bookstores, and just shop competitively. Go to Walmart, go to Aldi. They are definitely out to get you the best deals, those stores. Another idea is honestly, and I know we kind of go gung-ho into it thinking, okay, I'm going to go get that college degree and I'm going to make a ton of money. Well, work. And I know it sounds silly, and I know some of the jobs out there just, quite frankly, just suck. You're bagging groceries, you're moving lumber around or whatever it may be, pushing or pulling pallets. And I get it. It sucks. But do your time and just move on. And a very good piece of advice, even if it takes an extra year or two to graduate, but you have a job and it's, graduating with debt versus very little debt, I would take the little debt. I can tell you, having gone through it twice, fortunately/unfortunately, is that there's some good things, there's some bad things. And I would say one of the good things is you get work experience. So when you're done with the undergraduate and you're applying to a quote unquote real job, you already kind of know what you're doing. You already kind of have that customer service experience. You already kind of know how to deal with bosses and, employees and, coworkers, things like that. So you already kind of get the idea. Definitely if possible in working, and this may or may not be possible, but definitely get the tuition reimbursement through your employer. A lot of people are just young and they're just innocent to the fact that, these colleges are looking to do what's best for you. They don't care. They've got 10,000 other students that they're looking to take care of. So look out for yourself first. Get as much money as you can from your employer. And as silly as it sounds, I know some of these jobs, they're just kind of starter jobs. But if they required you to work an extra year or two after you graduate just to have some contracts so you can get that money, get it. Really, unless you're going out, unless there's a job waiting for you, which for a vast majority of people, it's not. So just work it. And, I hate to say this, but in your 20s, there's not a lot of jobs out there unless you have a very specialized, like, you go get a medical degree or a legal degree, things like that. A vast majority of people just kind of, they just do it until they figure something out. So definitely, just back to my original point, get the tuition reimbursement, work while you're getting your college degree. It helps you grow up. It helps you, become an adult, basically. And definitely don't, kind of getting back to that original point, don't be in a rush. Like I said, if it takes an extra semester or two and you graduate with less debt versus just a ton of debt, do it. Unfortunately, like I said, in your 20s, a vast majority is just kind of figure things out. So don't be in a rush to get out in the real world because there's nothing waiting for you. One of the most important things I'd like to talk about is ask. And this is probably the most important question. Albeit I have my problems with college and trade school, but they actually kind of sort of, in a long-winded roundabout way, I know I'm being long on that, they want to help you out. But unfortunately, with them, a lot of these undergraduates, they have 10,000 people entering school. So they don't know you from another student. And they probably couldn't, if they saw you, if one of the administrators saw you at the grocery store, they wouldn't even know your first name. So, but they want to help you out in a long-winded roundabout way. But ask, the admission school, ask anybody and everybody, hey, where can I find scholarships? Where can I find grants? Where can I find things that can help me out and pay for the school? And sometimes, and I'll be honest with you, you're going to have to ask multiple times because I'm sure people are just busy doing other things. And they're not going to, a lot of people are trying to make their own money and, they don't want to give out the school's money, but be humble and ask around, even as a parent, maybe kind of help your kid because your kid's still, I think despite the fact that we all think once they turn 18, they're adults, quote unquote, but they're not. You need to ask around. They're still kind of thinking they need to raise their hand to use the restroom, but you're 18, 19, you can do whatever you want to. So ask questions and ask multiple people, and you may have to bug people. You may have to send emails and wait a couple of days or call people back multiple times or not return their phone call. Ask. Getting back to my original point, if you can graduate with little debt versus a lot of debt and be a little bit annoying to people, do it because they're not going to be around when you're paying all that money back, plus interest and compounding interest and et cetera. So definitely ask questions. Another point I'd like to talk about is have a game plan. A lot of people just go to school just because it's what they're told. And I get it. You're young. You're still kind of figuring things out and so forth. And your parents are bugging you to leave the house. And, all your friends are going to school and they're getting the college degrees and going their own separate directions. And I understand, at the age of 18, 19, you may not have a lot of things going on. And I get it. This kind of gets back to my original point, work. You don't always figure out what you want to do. Sometimes you figure out what you don't want to do. And really the main difference between working and going to school in terms of finding out who you are, obviously in work, you get paid to do it, which is nice. You get your own wheels, you get a car, you get maybe a TV, you get things. And sometimes you just kind of do a bunch of random jobs and you say, okay, I like this aspect, but I don't like that aspect. And I like this and that. And you kind of triangulate things, so to speak. With school, it's still good. I'd still recommend it, but however, you're paying them, which is a problem. And classes last, 12 weeks or so, and then there's a test, and if you don't pass the test, and you're kind of just kind of figuring things out, it's kind of up in the air. And certainly one of the things, since I do talk a lot about business and taxes, certainly you can use that to your advantage. And what I mean by that is if your parents don't make a lot of money, use that to your advantage when applying for financial aid. Because usually when in financial aid, they're going to ask you how much do your parents make, and unfortunately, schools assume because your parents make whatever amount of money or just a minuscule amount above the threshold, they think, oh, okay, they're going to help their kid out. But in reality, your parent or parents are kind of tired of helping you out. They're trying to hit the road. So, definitely going back to those original points, shop around, see if you can get grants or scholarships, just anything you can do. Because, your parents, believe it or not, they have their own money problems. So they're trying to pay their bills and ready for retirement. And, one of the expressions I was told is that, in going to school, you can always get scholarships or grants. And your parents, which, by the time you're going to school or whatever, they're probably in their 40s, 50s, and beyond. So, and they're trying to save for retirement. And there's no scholarships or grants for retirement. So they're vigorously putting money in their IRAs, 401ks, things like that. And, I would certainly say that, keep in mind, that's not the end of the road. So if your parents make above that threshold, there's always things you can do. And one of those things, besides the original points I told you, is think about declaring yourself independent, at least on your taxes. So, because, most 18, 19-year-olds, they don't make a lot of money, which is okay, and that's fine. But use that to your advantage. And, since you don't make a lot of money, you can show your government your tax return, which, if you bag groceries or push pallets or whatever you do, they're not going to pay you a lot of money. You're basically a grunt, and you're making grunt type money. So use that to your advantage, and don't just accept things for what they are. So just to kind of overview, and believe me, I know most young people are kind of, they don't understand how the system works. And I know you're kind of like figuring things out in life, and you're kind of going from grammar school to college. And in grammar school, they want everything inexpensive, and school for the most part is free. And then when you get to college, boom, it gets really expensive. And there's fees, and there's fees, and there's fees. And even most parents don't ask about it. Well, anyways, a little bit about me, myself and my wife. We run Metro Bookkeeping, www.metroacc.com. Been in business for over 15 years now, so we've been fairly around. We have helped some of the parents out there that need tax returns for grants or scholarships. So we've been around. Check us out. Until next time.